Hello, BookTube. There are almost insurmountable odds against this video. I'm going to try to make something presentable anyway, but there's apocalyptic background noise. The internet is spotty. There's some sort of metal on metal tinkering going on directly next to the house. And I'm in the middle of a day-long massive allergy attack. I get them every midsummer. It's 80 degrees, 97% humidity outside today, so I've had it pretty bad uh, all day, and I kept waiting all day for any one or maybe two or maybe three of those variables to get better. And instead, they just kept getting worse, and I just kept putting it off and putting it off, and that added another variable, which is running out of light. Uh, so I thought I would just make one. I had a whole list of fascinating videos to make, but I'm only going to make one video uh, as my weekly team up with Michael K. Vaughan, where we're talking about comic books, the superhero and non-superhero comic books that we have both loved forever and ever. And this Epic Wednesdays collaboration started off going through Michael's Epic collections, the full color paperback reprint line that Marvel Comics does to reprint great runs from their however many 50 years of existence. Uh, and that's led to a lot of great videos and some rereadings that weren't so great. And today, Michael's pick, well, I'm of course letting him do the picking since he has all the Epic collections. But today his pick was great. Along the lines of a conception that we've talked about here before, which is the idea of a comic book run. Those of you, I don't imagine anybody who's not familiar with comic books would be watching this series, but if you are, or even if you aren't, even if you know comics, uh, that's how things tend to be grouped. Not even the tenure of a particular writer or the tenure of a particular artist, or even what an outsider would think, well, isn't a book either good or bad? Now, what these things tend to be grouped, comic book fans tend to group them in terms of arcs, in terms of runs, which is a synchronicity between the artist and the writer, even if they don't like each other, where suddenly they together are producing a run on a title that won't last forever. The minute a writer leaves or an artist leaves, the run will probably be shattered. Uh, but where they're producing a string of issues on a title that are just uh, fantastic, and everybody knows it. That's one of the great things about runs. One of the key elements of them is that you know you're watching one when it's happening. And Michael picked one of those today. He picked the Epic collection is called Doctor Strange, Master of the Mystic Arts, and it reprints in full color, big pages, really nice detail. The original run that Stan Lee did with artist Steve Ditko on Doctor Strange. It wasn't called Doctor Strange at the time, but Doctor Strange has had a couple of first issues. And there have been a few Doctor Strange Epic collections. And I have to applaud the powers that be at Marvel Comics for picking really good runs on Doctor Strange for Epic collections. I don't think Doctor Strange has had an Epic collection that hasn't had a good run. Every once in a while, the powers that be that are running this collection, this reprint line, will pick some run that I just think is terrible. But not in this case. This is Stan Lee inventing the character of Doctor Strange and Steve Ditko drawing him in a memorably imaginative and creepy way. I wasn't. I am when it comes to another one of Stan Lee's mega famous creations, Spider-Man, also had Stan Lee doing the original writing and Steve Ditko doing the original artwork. And I wasn't. I know it's heresy, but I wasn't really a fan of that. I am such a creature of John Romita Sr.'s rendition of Spider-Man that Steve Ditko seems a little bit dumb, a little bit jerky or quirky or whatever. But his style is perfect for Doctor Strange. And that helped a lot. I mean, I remember when these issues were coming out, it struck me as a little bit sort of a callback to the horror comics phase of before Marvel Comics, and it didn't really interest me, so I wasn't really paying attention to Doctor Strange at first. But I knew people who were, and it was universal that they were going to these issues for the artwork. For those of you who haven't you haven't seen the Benedict Cumberbatch movie, Doctor Strange is now a worldwide phenomenon. Everybody knows who he is because he was introduced into the Marvel Cinematic Universe in just the right way. And they got an extremely talented, charismatic actor to play him. Just wonderful. But it's the story of an arrogant surgeon named Stephen Strange who uh, has amazing ability in the operating theater, but is a total jerk. And in a classic Stan Lee twist, he has a car accident. He survives, but he loses the use of his hands. And instead of consulting, which is what he would certainly have done, or writing a textbook, or teaching seminars and making a mint, he decides to go on a quest as a stumble bum, as an anonymous person. He doesn't seem to have any money in savings because he goes walking to the Himalayas to find. At first, I think he's looking for a cure to his mangled hands. But once he's there, he encounters word of a strange figure called the Ancient One, who might be able to help him. But then once he encounters the Ancient One, it turns out the Ancient One can train him to be a disciple in the mystic arts, uh, which is sorcery. Here we have Doctor Strange releasing his astral self, which is thoroughly sentient, but a kind of ghost that lives inside him and that leaves his body inanimate. You see the ornate red cloak, that is his cloak of levitation that allows him to fly. The ornate brooch there is the Eye of Agamotto, which is an extremely powerful artifact. And Stephen Strange learns the mystic arts at under the tutelage of the Ancient One. And of course, we wouldn't be a Stan Lee story without an arch nemesis, and that arch nemesis is Baron Mordo. It also wouldn't be a Stan Lee story if someone didn't have a hereditary title. I don't really know why that is, but all the villains have hereditary titles, and Baron Mordo is at least at first was Doctor Strange's arch nemesis. The Doctor Strange ends up having a pretty good rogues gallery, including a couple of absolute scene stealer villains that are so memorable that people tend to forget. Poor old Baron Mordo. Nightmare is another character that Doctor Strange faces, the embodiment of horrible dreams, of nighttime terrors. Dormammu, who was the villain in the Doctor Strange movie. And these stories are terrific. They are creepy. They are memorably well done. You root for Doctor Strange to such an extent that you forget to ask all kinds of Steve questions. And reading these issues again, I didn't read this. I don't actually have this Epic collection. I have these issues in single issues and anthology sort of paperback comic books that just collect early Doctor Strange issues. But I remember them. I know them like scripture. and of course, there are problems with Doctor Strange's origin. There are all kinds of problems with them. For instance, Doctor Strange can affect the physical world. His spells, eventually, once he becomes Sorcerer Supreme, Master of the Mystic Arts, his spells give him almost godlike ability. To do all kinds of things, to change all kinds of things about the world through these mystic arts. And yet, never in the course of Doctor Strange, in any incarnation, in any run that I know of, does he heal his hands. So, was he passionate about his surgical career? He gives it up and doesn't seem to go back to it. And also, what are the mystic arts? This is the same problem that I have with the supernatural just in general out in the real world, away from comic books, which is that if it's supernatural, then it doesn't impinge on the natural world. Because everything that impinges on the natural world has to impinge on the natural world in some kind of way. And any of those ways will be observable, testable, measurable, quantifiable, in which case they won't be supernatural anymore. They'll be natural. I have the same problems with the mystic arts when they're introduced in Doctor Strange. Why is Stephen Strange a New York surgeon? Why is he able to master the mystic arts so that he can do teleportation spells, transformation spells, all kinds of things like that? Why is he able to do that? It'd be one thing if the only thing he could do was utilize the Cloak of Levitation and the Eye of Agamotto, but that's not true. This is something that he can do on his own. send a ghost out of his own body. And he can do a bunch of other things too. And that's not even counting the character in later incarnations who has staggering abilities, just staggering, world-altering abilities. How does Doctor Strange do that? Or for that matter, Baron Mordo, who is also a disciple of the Ancient One. How do they do it? Is it a talent that all humans have? Very much later than these issues, decades and decades and decades later, a version of Hank McCoy, the Beast from the X-Men, starts to develop mystic powers. Just recently, Carol Danvers, Captain Marvel, started to develop mystic powers. Can any human being in the Marvel world develop these abilities? And if not, why not? And what are they? If only some people can develop and some people can't, then that means there's a difference in those people. So what is that difference? It's the same question that I have with the supernatural outside of comics, which is that this ought to be quantifiable. It's no good to say, you don't have the same questions about Thor or Loki or Odin, because it's pretty clear. Stan Lee makes it pretty clear in the Thor continuity that there is a thing called the Odin Force, that there is a kind of force. The Asgardians might call it magic, but it clearly isn't. Or if it is, it's clearly quantifiable. Whereas with Doctor Strange, in these issues, it's not so bad. In these issues, Stan Lee hews very strictly to a supernatural template for stories and has Doctor Strange react to the physical world almost not at all. There is a story in this collection where he encounters Loki, Thor's brother, and makes a statement that seems to me to be self-evident. He makes a statement that yes, Loki isn't Thor, but Loki is still a god. So if you're talking about matching mystical ability against mystical ability, Doctor Strange wouldn't have a chance. He's a human. We certainly don't see that reflected in the Marvel Cinematic Universe Doctor Strange, who tosses around Asgardians like they were yesterday's furniture. But these issues you don't encounter that problem quite so much. Later on, especially once Doctor Strange is a member of the non-team called the Defenders, then there is a problem. Very much so. And I don't know, some people, Doctor Strange fans, might say that's just lazy writing on the part of Steve Englehart or Marv Wolfman or whoever. If you have a Doctor Strange who can stop time, change the memory of everyone in the world, fire what amounts to laser beams from his hands at will, no need to prepare incantations ahead of time, no need for any kind of quiet or concentration, no nothing like that, and very much having an effect on the real world, then you've got a real problem. Then you've got a character who is, yes, he's called Doctor Strange, Master of the Mystic Arts, but he's essentially non-explained, and that's bad. That's the same kicking the causation can down the road that I have with any concept of the supernatural. If in an issue of the Defenders, Doctor Strange can blast a laser beam out of his hand at a member of the wrecking crew and say, power is something I have in abundance, well, then you have to explain how that is. And if it's true that he has it in abundance, then why isn't everybody able to do that? Actually, there are some parallels, some very interesting parallels between the origin story of Doctor Strange and the origin story of Doctor Doom. Because Dr. Victor Von Doom also goes wandering in search of mystic recompense for a disfiguring accident. In that sense, the origins are almost exactly the same. And they do, in later incarnations of Doctor Doom, they do learn the mystic arts, both of them, from separate sources. One turns good and one turns evil, and one seems to have access to a whole lot more mystic power than the other. Those kinds of differences, beyond just blandly saying that they're a matter of aptitude, I don't think that Marvel ever really explains the supernatural element in its continuity very well. But when it's a really great run of Doctor Strange, you don't care. I like Steve Ditko's run on Doctor Strange. I think it's really good. I much prefer Gene Colan's run on Doctor Strange, which is captured in an Epic collection. Then again, I do not have. But that one, if I had a choice, if I went to a bookstore and the two of them were on the shelf side by side, and I could only get one, I would get the Gene Colan one, even though it's not as canonical as this. But anyway, the upshot is that this is a very, very, very strong recommend. This is as good as Stan Lee era Marvel Comics get. So unfortunately, those of you are bloodthirsty out there and are waiting for me and Michael to disagree, it's not going to be this week. It's not going to be this week. This is just a recognized classic run on this character. So it was worth it for me to do a comic book video on Comic Book Wednesday. A Comic Book Wednesday video on a Thursday would feel a little weak. But anyway, it's taken all that I can do to muster up the right conditions here. And I'm afraid that they're going to explode if I take any longer. So I'm going to wrap this up at 15 minutes and try to make a barrage of videos tomorrow when maybe the elements will be in my favor. In the meantime, I will see you then. Thank you, BookTube.